Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. That's Rob, I'm Brian. This was the U.S. Grand Prix sprint weekend. Oh, so good to be back after a long autumn break. How are you, Rob?
I'm great. I'm absolutely great. I think it was a double whammy. I think, like you say, long autumn break,
Yes.
and then if a bit of a nothing burger of a race had turned up, we would have probably loved it anyway because we haven't seen a race for so long.
Yes.
But when you pick COTA and a long full break, it's like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah, it was good.
It was it was so good. It was so
So
good.
good.
I can't wait to talk about it. In fact, I want to just rush through the news and social and the video vault just so we can start talking about the
I
race
agree.
weekend
Let's do it
because
quickly because it was so good.
it was so good. And actually, not a lot really happened. So
Yeah.
for any new listeners out there, we'll take a stroll through news and social, see what was happening in the news and on social media. Ryan will bust open his video vault and see what videos caught his eye this week, and then we will jump headlong into reviewing the race weekend. And if that's not enough, we've got to preview Mexico because we're going to be in. This is the first of a triple header, so there's no rest for us, Brian, none at all.
Well, and
One-
while Mexico's not my favorite race, just the fact that we don't have an off week, count me in. I'm excited.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we had two special liveries this week.
Hmm.
I've got to be honest, only one of them really stood out on track, probably for the wrong reasons because it made us think
Agreed.
they were a different car. But Alpine, under subterfuge of it's an Indiana Jones tie-in, what they really worked out is their car sucks. They looked at McLaren last year and said, they dropped this upgrade package in that made them go really fast. What did they do? And it's like, I think they dropped some of the blue and just went more papaya. So maybe we should just go orange.
I'm curious to see if, like, will Alpine show up in Brazil just exactly copying Ferrari at this point? Just totally
Just turn up red.
scarlet red.
Oh yeah, it's a tie-in with
Yeah, it's tied
ketchup.
with
Yeah,
ketchup.
yeah.
Heinz 57. Here we go.
And then also Haas did
Did
an
they?
American themed livery,
I
which
didn't
on
notice it.
social media looked amazing. Like the way they kind of put it against kind of the Texas Star and all this kind of stuff, and they had the eagle coming out of the front of the Haas logo. It looked amazing. I think they'd done it once I saw cars on track. I
I
didn't really notice it at all.
didn't notice it at all on track. And as the resident American, I always keep my eye out for the stars, the stripes, and anything related to it. And what did we have? I didn't notice a thing. But Gene was there. I did see Gene Haas in the stands, in the paddock area, and it was such a shame Gunter didn't get a chance to interview him. It would have been just great.
Yeah, that would have been absolute gold. A bit something that I thought was going to be gold that turned into nothing was I saw a Bonotto interview pop up. I was like, oh, is this the Bottas announcement? Is Valtteri got a seat next year? And all he really was talking about is like Audi's got a big job ahead of them. It's going to take them several years before they can fight for championships. Okay, wow, what a soundbite.
Yeah, nothing
Um,
burger. Can we make an assumption, and this is without Pitlane Paul insight? I have to assume Valtteri's asking for a 2-year deal, and that they've offered him a 1-year deal, and he's saying no thanks. That's the tea
okay.
leaves I've read. He wants to be there for the new regs in 26, not just a placeholder in 25. And some of the guys they may want to put in there have agreements with their current driver academies. So it seems like it's coming down to, will Valtteri take a 1-year deal or not? Can he get them to give him a 2-year deal or not? Or can any of the Colapintos or other guys whose names escape me because I've been drinking for 4 hours, will any of them get in that seat? But it is crazy when you think about it that there's really only one seat left, yet Liam Lawson goes on TV tonight talking about getting a seat for next year, and he ain't talking about Audi.
Yeah, I know. No, I mean the way Bonotto in this interview was saying that they still haven't decided which way the chips are going to land.
Valtteri, go Valtteri. We want
Do they
Valtteri.
go with someone experienced to go alongside Hulk to help move the team along in the right direction, Kuh? Or do they just lean into Hulk for
Yeah.
the experience role and go and put an exciting rookie in there? So I don't even know that it is coming down to Bottas holding out for 2 years. I think, again, we haven't checked with Pitlane Paul, but if Bottas was offered right now a 1-year deal, I'm sure he's in for next year. I just don't think the deal's in front of him right now. I think Colapinto is seriously being looked at.
Yeah. The longer it
So,
goes, too, and the better Franco does, the harder the
I
negotiating gets,
know,
I
I
would have
know.
to assume.
I know. Another little news thing that popped up, which they're scrapping the fastest lap point for next
Why?
season, which, yeah,
Did
why?
Daniel Ricciardo ruin this on his way out last week or 3 weeks ago, last race?
I'd like to just to have kept it and either gone one of two ways. Either keep it and just say you earn that point whether you
Yep.
finish first or 20th. Like you finish 20th,
Yeah.
it might give some excitement to people at the back. They've got nothing left to go for. Let's strap a set of soft tyres on and just go
Agreed.
for it and see if I can get a championship point. Or what was the other version of it I saw where you get the fastest lap point, but it's only available to those in the top 10. So
Correct.
don't
The
do this
fastest
thing
lap
where
of the top 10
the
finishers.
fastest lap of the top 10 finishers. So don't have this weird thing where somebody in 16th can get it but earn nothing for it because
Right.
it's pointless. No, they've just decided to scrap it altogether.
I mean, I'm going to
So
get this way off, but it was like 9 years from 50 to 59, then came back, and then we've had it for 15 or so years. I mean, I like it. I don't want to get rid of it, but, I'm also afraid of change, so I won't complain. And then speaking of afraid of change, we had a big story this week that lasted for about 5 minutes, and then everyone's like, wait, hang on. It was the Red Bull Bibgate scandal, and Andrew Benson leaned in on this on Twitter and F1. Red Bull have admitted they made changes to the car as a result of discussions with the governing body, the FIA. The changes they made were just to remove the flexible bib movement situation where you could raise or lower the front of the car. And fascinatingly, it took 3 days of people saying, is this something or not, until we learned the following. The adjustment sits within the footwell and cannot be accessed with the driver in place. It's under the heel support and requires you taking apart the cockpit. The mechanics must remove the nose cone, a separate panel, a carbon section in the footwell, and multiple mechanics to perform this. And anyone doing this in Parc Ferme would be caught red-handed because it takes forever to do this, and everyone's known it's there. That seems like a nothing burger to me.
massive nothing burger. It seems like maybe if you want to put your tinfoil hat on that this is maybe the team that raised it was McLaren as a little bit of a revenge attack for
Agreed.
the flexi wing thing.
That's a good
Because
call.
apparently this has been known about like forever. Any design has to go into an open document that is shared with all teams. So this extra button that was there that can do this thing, or extra access point that can change the front ride height, it's been known about forever. And someone's kicked up a stink about it, and the FIA looked at it and gone, there's no way you've been using this in Parc Ferme, but the possibility, I'm doing air quotes for people that can't see the pod here, the possibility exists that you could. So what we're going to do, we're going to make you either got to get rid of it, or we're going to put a special little FIA sticker on there that creates a seal to show you can't have tampered with it. I believe it's the latter they went with. So somebody at the FIA had to go and order a bunch of special stickers to stick on the car this week.
Twitter went nuts because
I know. Of course, they
half
could
of
just
them
Red
were
Bull
saying,
and cheating and
right,
blah, blah, blah,
but
blah.
then half of them were saying, well, you wouldn't add weight to a car unless it made a difference. And then half of them were saying it's just an easy way to adjust something during free practice. And then most importantly, our buddy Nicholas Timbasis weighed in. He said, honestly, can I say with complete certainty about whether there's ever been anything regular? No. Can I say the matter is closed? Yes, absolutely. We got to get Nicholas Timbasis on here in the offseason. That would make me the happiest man in the world.
Oh my gosh. And talking of who could become the happiest man in the world, that's an awful segue.
That's
But
terrible, Rob.
apparently, Honda management are now weighing in on trying to put their weight behind getting Yuki to get a test drive in RB. So Danny Rick had a test drive last year, didn't he, to kind of earn his spot back in? They're saying Yuki should be given the same
Why don't they wait a
opportunity.
few more races and see how he does against Liam and give one of them the test drive?
I don't know. Last one that is just a bit weird in my book is like it just feels like the FIA are so desperate to wine and dine Audi while shunning Andretti. It's like, okay, we're going to take you out to dinner. Come on, Audi. Andretti, you got to stay out there. We'll throw your doggy bag out. In fact, no, you're never coming into F1. Because now what they're doing is they're changing the cost cap for 2026 to take into account salary offsets.
Yeah.
Because the Audi team based in Switzerland have high salaries over there. But for them to come in as Audi and start doing the 2026 regs, they're going to have to pay so much money. But I'm going to pay all this money, but I won't get as much time because I've got to pay all these people more. So that's world economics. It's like, don't have them all based in Switzerland, maybe.
I mean,
I don't know.
everything you say is correct, except when I did the SAP European vacation this summer, I can say we were in Switzerland for a while, and it is effing expensive like you couldn't believe. All I needed were a few glasses of wine, just to put a little balm in the wounds of the travel, and it was like $23 American per glass for the cheapest swill they had. We went to a market, and my wife got a salad and a bottle of water, and it was 36 American dollars. And I looked at her and go, did you even figure out the difference from Swiss francs to that? She goes, no, I couldn't figure it could be that much. 36 American dollars for a bag of weeds and some water. Switzerland's expensive, bro. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but like they knew that when they entered F1.
I know.
So I don't know. I got actually joking aside, I got no real problem with this. It actually kind of makes sense to have offset
cost
things
of living
for
situation.
yeah, exactly. But it does just seem like the FIA is they're bending over backwards so much that they just want Audi in. I didn't realize Audi was such a big deal to get into the sport, but obviously it is. But
I didn't either.
I think that puts a bow around News and Social for the week. Do you want to crank open the video vault?
Let's do it so we can get to the race weekend. Open the door, baby. All right, so as always, I go looking where people don't look to find the best videos for all of us. First off, Neil deGrasse Tyson explains the physics of Formula One racing on the Star Talk channel. That's
wow.
Right. 17 minutes, I watched the whole darn thing on the Star Talk channel. It was good. If you're a huge F1 nerd, you may know all of this already. But I enjoyed the fact, a little spoiler, they basically show how a plane's wing works for takeoff and how a rear wing on an F1 car works similarly, except upside down. So instead of providing up force, that's not a word, it makes down force, that is a word, and keeps the rear of the car on the ground.
They spent 17 minutes getting, and you needed to watch all seven. Okay, good.
16 minutes explaining to Neil deGrasse Tyson what F1 is, and then 1 minute of the
1
physics.
Minute telling the most obvious thing in the world that an F1 car is like an upside down wing.
It's not a mandatory watch. Similarly, the Lake Como Unfiltered filming the Peroni Nastro Azzurri 0.0 campaign on the Charles Leclerc channel. I always watch Charles' videos. It was 6 minutes long. It was his birthday this week, and if you like Charles Chuck Leclerc, you may enjoy this. But if you don't enjoy
Charles Chuck Leclerc
as much as others, you may want to pass on that one. The one that I do ask people to watch, though, is on Instagram, and we don't really normally do Insta videos because they're harder to link to for me. Valtteri's Insta and Highland Graham. Okay. It's not too long. It's how they made music with his biographical data around the track. All right, then. And the point isn't that it's like they take his heartbeat and other things and they turn it into music, which, again, they didn't really show it. It was lost on me. The point is, at the very end of the race, at the very end of the 3 or 4 minutes, he crosses the finish line and someone comes over the radio and tells him, "Great job, Valtteri, great job." And I'm 99.9 million % sure it's Pitlane Paul.
So you're pretty sure then?
A bazillion %. I listened to it on my ass, Paul. So anyway, that was the highlight of that video. And listener Adam sent that into us, not knowing it was Pitlane Paul. And I wrote back, I go, "Yo, did you pick up that was Pitlane Paul?" He's like, "What?" Last couple things really fast. A new video with Checo just came out on the GQ channel. Things he needs to bring with him to race weekends. I would assume one of them is the "I'm being fired" box, because it's got to be fired up pretty soon here if it hasn't been yet.
Well, next week he's got to bring the "I'm retiring" box, because he always retires at the Mexican Grand Prix, right?
Video telling people he wasn't. And then the last one was ESPN did a clip, and I don't have a link for it. It was just on the ESPN channel that I saw, asking drivers to name college mascots here in the States. And we have a lot of colleges, and we take college football, which is American football, very seriously here. And we have very, predominant mascots. And the best part is watching drivers from other parts of the world who don't watch college football try to figure out what the hell these mascots are. And Ohio State has this weird looking thing. And Lando goes, "What is that, a Humpty Dumpty?" And someone else said something similar. So the Ohio State Humpty Dumpties is my new favorite mascot in all of college football. Rob, anything else for you, or shall we close it and move on?
Close it up and let's move on.
Done. Race weekend, baby.
Okay. Pitlane Paul's favorite thing about a sprint weekend is there is only one practice session. And I'm not going to spend any time on that other than the 4 things that we wrote down. Alpine looked like McLaren. Mercedes keeps spinning.
Around in circles.
Keep that thought ready for a race.
I'll come back.
The wind was causing issues. Nobody
Yes.
could break into one of the corners because the wind just kept blowing them off the track. And Ferrari looked fastest.
Ferrari did look good. I watched this
Ooh.
live, so it was
So
like
did I.
around my lunchtime, and I blocked it, and I went and watched it. And first of all, I wasn't listening to the commentators yet, but I was also caught by the Alpine McLaren situation. I go, what the hell's this? Is McLaren doing? Oh, wait, I've seen the other. What? It's an Alpine in orange? Why would you do that? I didn't.
It was,
I don't
and
get
the worst thing, or the funniest thing that one of the commentators said was, when the Alpine is in motion, its wheels look more McLaren-like than
Yes,
McLaren's own wheels do. And I was
so
like,
good.
and that might have not been from practice. I might just pick that up on qualy or somewhere.
It
But
doesn't matter.
it was such a good soundbite. It was like, yeah, you're right. They do look like the Google logos in motion. Where as soon as McLaren start rolling, it doesn't look like the Google logo anymore. Like, how did Alpine do that? You know, have McLaren running down to Alpine, going, okay. I know you're going to get rid of this livery next week, but can we have your wheels?
Can you send us the color combos for those things? Then you said Mercedes spinning, and you tweeted a video of a kid in a bouncy thing just vomiting upon himself, spinning and spinning and spinning after practice. Boy, was that accurate. They could not handle the S's. They couldn't handle anything. Any little bit of, if they broke wind, it disturbed the car sincerely, which is crazy. Like, they have gained some of the most time relative to others this season, yet their car is still the most finicky, at least in the top 5 or 6, where you don't know what they're showing up with every week.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's there was a graphic put up over one of the sessions that was showing that delta of how everyone's done since Bahrain to now, and it showed that McLaren has increased on average of 0.3 seconds per lap. I think Ferrari was the next one. Red Bull have lost 0.2 seconds per lap. And I think it kind of helped. And I think Mercedes were kind of in there as well as kind of like fantastic, but for 10th or something. But for me, it just kind of, I don't want to go off too much down tinfoil alley here with our tinfoil hats on, but this whole thing about, Miami, since Miami, Red Bull were forced to get rid of illegal stuff on their car and everything's crashed and burned and everything's rubbish. It's like, no, actually that graphic and looking back over the lap times, especially from last year to this year, and then all of the progression of this year, just kind of just rams home. Red Bull nailed the regulations right at the beginning. Yep. If you nail the regulations, you haven't got much of a ceiling to go into. It's not like you can keep finding infinite performance. There is a cap to the aerodynamic performance of a set of regulations. So Red Bull came in right at the ceiling of that. We had then they tweaked it while everyone else played catch up and worked out what the hell was going on with zero side pods and all that kind of crap. And they were able to spend a whole year fine-tuning while everyone else was scrambling. The result of the fine-tuning was the most dominant season we've ever seen last year.
The RB19, baby.
Exactly. But then just like we got the foreshadowing last year, McLaren dropped a set of upgrades late in the year that showed they now started to understand how these regs work. And they suddenly went from maybe scrapping for points to suddenly they were podium stalkers, and McLaren just went, they just took off. And they hit the ground running this year. Red Bull tried to respond around the Miami time. We put out on this pod that Adrian Newey had said he didn't like the direction they were going in with the upgrades. Right. And we basically got Aston Martin downgrades to the Red Bull. And this graphic that came out this weekend just summed it up for me. You've got Red Bull have gone back 0.2. McLaren have kept understanding the floor concept and going towards their ceiling. So they've gone up 0.3. So I think the swing is half a second a lap or whatever it is. That's just how Formula One works. Like all these people trying to find conspiracies that Red Bull have been caught cheating and that's why they're falling apart. It's like, no. And just watch today's race when we get on to talking about it. Red Bull have started to understand this and have wound back a few of the upgrades. They're trying to get back to the stability of the car from the beginning of the year. And guess what we've seen on the last 2 races? Max back up at the front again. Right. I mean, it just drives me nuts when all the conspiracy theorists come out.
I'm with you 100%. I mean, and when you look at it, at the end of the day, the RB19 was one of the most dominant cars relative to others, yet they still scrapped it for the RB20. So there have been many races recently where I've gone back race to race, year to year, 24 to 23, and I said, hey, should they have just run the RB19? And the answer is always no. The 20 is faster. So it's not as though they've sat stationary or gone backwards. They're still progressing, sort of platform over platform. But within the platform of the RB20, they haven't gone as far ahead as others. So it is fascinating.
Because they're almost up at
probably.
the limit, probably. I mean, and the others are just making huge strides to catch up, which, again, let's get on to today's race. But I'm so excited for next year because I think everyone just keeps converging,
for
keeps
the record,
converging.
For any new listeners, can we just talk about the fact about a year ago, I said people would catch Red Bull and we'd have some good racing by the end of the regs, and you said no, Red Bull would
No, I
run
thought
off.
Red Bull were going to dominate until the regs changed.
Right.
So I'm happy to be wrong.
I see
and I said back then I would be...
Yeah. I see you twitching uncontrollably to admit that you were wrong. Is that correct?
No, not at all. I said right back then, I said, I will be the happiest person alive to be proven wrong. I didn't trust everyone else's development to be able to catch up the huge
Rob
delta
is the
that Red
happiest
Bull had
person
got,
alive to tell us he's wrong. Anyway, let's go back to SQ1. Who do we lose?
Right, so sprint qualifying. Sprint qualifying threw up 4 non-shocks, I would say, with Ocon, Albon, Bottas, and Zhou crashing out. But Mr. Piastri was in there.
What is happening to Oscar in the last few races?
Well, I mean, in the race, he's going to do all right, but the sprint quali was a shocker. And then SQ2, Lawson, Alonso, Stroll, and Gasly, not a shock, but Mr. Perez is in there.
He was trying early. He's like, hey, Brian, if you're looking for the pits, I want to put my name in early.
Oh my gosh. So then SQ3 came around, and I got to be honest, I wasn't expecting Verstappen. He'd looked pretty good, and in practice he'd been okay, but the Ferraris had definitely looked quickest. And then Ferraris, Leclerc third, Sainz fifth. They weren't like tearing it up like I thought, and Verstappen nailed it. But then, surprise, surprise, like I hadn't seen Mercedes coming from anywhere. They'd just been spending all their time spinning, and Russell decides to have one lap when he's not spinning, and he goes and puts it into second spot. I mean, I wasn't expecting that as the front row for the sprint, to be honest. Thought, who's notable shout-outs in there? The Hulk, I've got to say, the Hulk. 6th spot in sprint quali. I think Haas had a quality weekend.
They did. 6th and 8th. Hulk 6th, as you already said. Magnussen, the Canadian pronunciation of his name, 8th. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And they had a really good weekend, whole weekend, full stop. Like, we don't even need to qualify it. They did a great job. But let's hear from Paul about Friday, and then we'll get into the race on Saturday.
Hey now, so Austin, Friday done. It's my triple donger. I'm going to try and get... I've got one more... we got one more sprint race. I know Brazil. I think that's the last one. So, yeah, triple donger is going to be the word of this one. If anyone's ever had a triple donger, feel free to write into to Rob and Brian.
More Rob.
Anyway, I digress. Well, okay, FP1, everyone's trying to get their laps in, blah, 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 you know how it is. Lot to learn. Track's been resurfaced, or a lot of the track was resurfaced. Was there anything special from FP1? No. There's a lot of talk all week about Red Bull's cheating. Look, everyone finds ways of making their car better. I think I've said this before on the pod, so let's not hate. It's just something they've got. If it's worked for them and they've got away with it, absolutely brilliant. I think it's superb. Every team's got something in the car which probably isn't kosher. It's just the way life is. That's what this sport's all about. So long may innovation continue. I fully support it. On to qualifying. Real big shocks. I guess for Oscar, that's strange, really. For someone who's normally I think he's quite a reliable guy, but quite shocked to see him go out. There's Sergio going out. Yeah, interesting. Colapinto did a great job. Albon, I think the Williams car was actually not too bad. A bit like Haas, I think they have got a good car. I also think Albon obviously made a mistake. Can't say I think he made a mistake. He did a full 360. So I don't think the performance of Colapinto compared to him is relevant, even though obviously it clearly is. And fair play to Haas. But apart from that, the front, yeah, look, Max being at the top, it should make things interesting for tomorrow. Lando's still around. Oh, Lewis, yeah, I felt a bit sorry for him. But they can't say that going out early wasn't going to work because George very nearly got pole position. So, interesting. Let's see what happens tomorrow. Bye-bye.
So, Paul leads us in for tomorrow, the Saturday. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Before we get there, though, had you listened to Paul's thing before? Because I've listened to none of his recordings yet.
Me either.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm just making sure they're Friday, Saturday, Sundays before I start
Yeah.
And I'm risking it all by previewing the sound file as opposed to playing it in some program, so if it breaks later. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Your button finger might come back and we'll
Mhm.
cut off the last 4 seconds. No, what I was going to say is he basically hit all the key points that we just made. So that basically almost makes us Formula One insiders. Like we are almost pit lane staff, right?
The
'Cause,
transitive property of F1 equalities.
yeah, this time next year, Brian.
We'll still be
Okay,
doing
yes, sir.
this. So anyway, it was fascinating, right? The sprint starts Saturday in the U.S. Central Time for me, like around 1. It was brilliant, right? Lando up 2 at the start to second place. Charles and George with a great battle on lap 1. It was fun to watch, but I will say this. Max just kind of like, he's like, hey, do you remember me? Max Verstappen, world champion, multiple times. I'm just going to tootle on along. See you guys later. And he did. And I'm like, I remember this. I remember this tape. However,
I've seen this. I've seen this one.
yeah, I'm familiar with this. This is a good one. However, COTA really did deliver, and it showed us in the sprint. We'll talk about the race, the proper race shortly. We're in the cooldown room, where the drivers even said, man, you get good racing here. You get good racing here is the right answer.
Do you know what? Rather than maybe not even picking apart every single of these 19 laps, just to kind of sum it up, is that I absolutely love watching the cars go through those S's.
Yes.
And I love it when somebody has nailed it into turn 1 but hasn't quite been able to pull the move off. But now they can almost basically put both arms out and just hold on to the rear wing. and they do, and they are going flat out because you don't need to lift through there. As long as you get the momentum right through those corners, you're just almost like when they watch the onboard, it looks easy. It's just left, right. But I mean, man, they are throwing it through those corners. And so many people try to put moves on the inside or the outside of the S's.
Nope.
I'm not sure an overtake is actually possible there, but they don't care. They don't care because they're highly competitive F1 drivers, and they're like, if there's room, I'm going to try it.
When you got to be
Brilliant.
on the person's bumper before you get to the next straight.
Oh.
So it actually, you have to be
It's just
like tied to the bumper through the S's before you do 11 into the long straight up to 12, where you can do a dive bomb if you set it up right. It was great. By the way, the Ferrari on Ferrari action in the sprint race was phenomenal. I'm literally sitting
amazing.
here. I can hear Fred Vasseur and his French accent in my head. Gentlemen, we do not want to bin the cars. That's French, by the way, in case I've had a couple drinks. That was such a good race, and it just never stopped. It was, again, the Ferrari battles. George was trying to get Lando, was all over him. Carlos ends up getting George. Like, we talk about the fact that people won't race if it doesn't matter. There were people outside the points still racing in the sprint race. I don't know why.
So I wondered about this.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about this now, is that some sprints are absolute boredom. They're almost like watching free practice.
Correct.
Other than the fact that they're racing for something.
It's
slightly.
almost like
It
someone
just turns-
told them, "Oh, hold position," and then they take off and do nothing.
It's like Scale Electrics racing. They're all just in the same slot and they can't go past each
Right.
other, and off they go. But there's something about, I'm going to pick out COTA and Brazil that
Phenomenal. Both
works
great.
really well for sprint. Now, do you think it's because we think the drivers enjoy driving these tracks so much that it almost just, even if the direction is, take it easy, guys, don't bin the car for the main event, we've still got quali, we've still got the race, take it easy. Do you think there's something in these tracks that it's just impossible to resist the urge to go wheel-to-wheel racing? Because I don't understand why some tracks work well for sprints and some don't. And it's not even like some of the sprints, the main race doesn't work. We've got some examples that I'm scrambling and I can't think of one, but we've got some sprints where the main race is pretty good, but the sprint version of it sucks.
Well, and maybe we think the race is good, like Spa. Didn't we do a sprint there last year and it stunk? I can't remember.
Spa's great. But
well, we think it's great, but with the data says maybe not as much as we think. Anyway, I agree. And like Mexico, thank God next week they do not have a sprint there, because I was thinking
It's going to get boring.
So, like, it's going to get boring. But this was great. Like, as I told Rob over WhatsApp, we've been 3 weeks off. It has been a dry spell. The race starts, the sprint race, and it is good. And I'm thinking to myself, is this good because we haven't seen racing, or is this good flat out? It was good flat out. The whole thing. Checo and Yuki were battling. And by the way, that's a sign there's a problem. When Checo and Yuki are battling for ninth, Red Bull has to make a change, but we're going to hold on to that for the main race.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we had, I didn't put the results on here. We know Max won it. And then right at the end, I think it was that Lando was chasing down Max and then fell away a little bit, came under pressure, locked up massively. Carlos came shooting through and went, I'll have some of that. Charles looked like he was going to take Lando as well, and I think Lando held on, right?
It was the last lap going up into turn 1 on lap 19. You nailed it. Lando locked up, and Carlos is like, leftovers, I'll take these. And it went diving down the inside, took him, and he was second. Lando third. Charles almost had him, but didn't. And at one point later in the lap, Charles had to brake. It reminded me of Monza last year, 23, when Charles was behind Carlos and lost control and went sliding towards him at the chicane. Same thing. He's like sliding uncontrollably at Lando. I'm like, oh, crap. And somehow missed him. And nobody crashed. But I loved it. I thought it was a phenomenal sprint. It was a great way to send me off to Sleepland Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. I loved the first half of this weekend.
Yeah, amazing. And then what do we have then? We had qualy in the evening, right?
Yep, Saturday.
And last time we didn't get the Piastri stopper as the first round dropout. So Hamilton kind of said, oh, hold my beer. I'll come in and give people some headlines to write about. So we had the classic Bottas and Zhou, unfortunately, dropped out. Colapinto and Albon also missed out. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton decided he'd like to make a challenge for himself on Sunday.
Lewis doesn't have a lot of talking time because he goes out fast in the race. Why didn't they swap out everything when he was starting 19th or 18th, depending on penalties? Why didn't they give him new power units and new EKUs and MGKs and MKGs?
I don't know.
Like, that's the time, bro. Send everything. Just build a stockpile. Why would they not have done a pit lane start for him or a 60? Like, Liam Lawson had a 60-place penalty for replacing everything. Why Lewis was 19th? Why wouldn't they have done it as well? Like, I don't understand why they didn't just. And he even said in one of the post-race pen interviews, post-quali pen interviews, he's like, "Yeah, it might be time to just change everything out and take the penalty now." They didn't do it. I don't know.
I know. And I'm going to hold that thought about other things that Mercedes didn't do when we get to the end of the main qualifying. So we go through to Q2. Lawson, they said, oh, he's not going to go out. And that made a lot of sense. And then suddenly Lawson's coming out. And
Just
then
for a
everyone's
tow,
getting all...
though.
Yeah. Well, just for a tow, and I think the first one wasn't a tow. The first one was tyre scrubs, just to do a scrub tyre. And then they sent him out for tow duty. But when he first came out, the commentators lost it. They were like, oh my God, what if he out-qualifies Tsunoda and knocks Tsunoda out, but then he gets his grid penalty and has to go all the way to the back?
60-place grid penalty. That's crazy.
Yeah, this is a disaster for RB. And it's like, oh, no, he's just out there to give a tow. And then I love the bit where Yuki was ungrateful for the tow. It's like, yeah, tell him next time he gives me a tow not to move to the left because I had all this dust in my face. I'm like, dude, the guy was giving you a tow. I mean,
that was the greatest. And he's like critiquing it. I'd like to start in the middle and then like him to bail out to the left just before the corner. And if you could arrange it so it's perfect, that'd be great. Thank you. Otherwise, I get a lot of dust in my face. Sincerely, Yuki S. Tsunoda. Like, what are we talking about here?
but even all the tows in the world weren't enough to do anything because Lawson didn't set a time. Stroll was just strolling around. Then we had Ocon out. Hulk and Tsunoda just missed out as well. So that sent us... And Perez just squeaked through. But anyway, so that gave us what? Perez, Magnussen, Alonso, Gasly, Russell, Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, and Norris as the guys going for the pole shootout.
Right.
And everything was building towards this is Max Verstappen's pole to lose. Lando went in and put an absolute phenomenal marker down. Max was just behind him, but on his second lap, Max was lighting up purples, I think, on the board. It was like, yeah, here it comes. This is Max's...
Then double waved yellow.
And then it's like, hang on a minute. There's a British guy in need of some help here that wants to get pole. So what does the other British guy do? He's like, Lando, this one's for you.
Hold my tea.
Crikey. Yeah, hold my tea. Crikey, here we go. George just decides
a bit peckish.
Channel his inner free practice spin and just sent it off into the gravel. And Verstappen comes upon double wave yellows and has to back off. And that was that.
Do you think there's like, so when they showed it, again, we've talked about this in the last few races, not few weeks. I love it when they're showing something live and you see a car going sideways or backwards in the background across screen. You're like, well, that's not good. That's what George was. He was backwards and spinning in the background of the video, and you see like, well, that can't be something good. And then thankfully he was okay, which is why we can joke, even though it was a high G impact. Do you think Mercedes has a button that they can just push like spin car now? Because they were terrible all weekend. George and qualy, Lewis in the race, everybody in FP1.
I'm actually thinking in the Mercedes garage,
Yeah.
they've got a big Wheel of Fortune thing that the engineer spins, and sometimes it lands on fastest lap, sometimes it lands on tire management, but there's just those just the bankrupt things. Every now and again, there's lock rear wheels,
pace, race pace, spin, and who knows what's going to happen because nobody does. Toto, while he's all hunky, dilfing himself out there in the videos, it looks like he's confused too. He's like, oh. We're going to be this crappy this weekend? All right, that's news to me.
So the other thing that happened was that while everyone else seemed to realize that track limits was the thing, so push it as hard as you can, but try to use that blue line as a guide to not go over it. Checo was like, blue lines are for losers. I'll go where I like. No, you won't, Checo. You're going to lose your lap time and you're going to finish 10th.
Oh, God.
Poor old Checo.
But he went from 8th to 10th. It wasn't like he went from 1st to 10th.
No, I know, but he still lost his lap time. Piastri, a shout out, turned it around from sprint quali. He dropped it in on 5th. The Ferraris that looked fast in practice were 3rd and 4th, and then we got Lando and Max up on 1 and 2. So just coming back to George, and this is the bit I don't understand. I put a question to the Discord, but I think I was too late to get an answer. There was something flying around that said Mercedes had bought upgrades, but they'd only got two copies. One was on Lewis's, one was on George's. So
and
George
Lewis offered George's his on the rebuild car, right?
Well, this is. I don't know if he did or if he didn't, but what they were saying was Parc Fermé rules. If you were swapping like for like pieces, it doesn't count as breaking Parc Fermé. If you were putting the old parts on, so if George takes his upgraded wing that is now in pieces because he put it into the barrier and puts the old wing on, so it's almost a downgrade, still breaches Parc Fermé, and you've got to do all the penalties and start. So they were like saying, oh, yeah, the logical thing is here. Lewis is already at the back. He's already doing a pit lane start. He gives all of his new stuff to George. George can do his change and won't get stung for it and can keep his grid spot of wherever he was, 6th, and away we go. None of that happened, and George ended up going backwards, right?
He did. I never thought of that. The upgrades being part of Parc Fermé. So if you're in a car that doesn't have them, can you get them from somebody else? But he did.
George had them, and Lewis had them. Right. So it would have been a like-for-like swap. So it wouldn't have breached the sum regulation.
Well,
I can't
Lewis
remember what number it is.
Downgraded.
Yeah, but Lewis was already at the back getting...
I know, and I already told you he should have taken a whole new engine and everything.
Lewis should have taken a whole bunch of stuff. Agreed. And they had to start in the pit lane and then be at the back. And while he was getting a whole bunch new of everything, said, oh, by the way, here's my new pieces. You can give those to George so that he can retain 6th. But Mercedes did none of that.
But the problem is I think George needed more than just upgrades. I think he needed a gearbox and chassis.
Okay, it was everything, was it? He hosed it up too much, had he?
Yeah, the way he hit, I'm guessing the gearbox was hosed, and that alone will bump you back a bit. So, anyway, let's hear from Paul on Saturday's action.
Okay, day 2 of my triple donger. That was the sprint race. That was qualifying. Sprint race was okay, wasn't it? A bit of jostling, Ferrari fighting each other.
We liked it.
It's pretty close. It's pretty exciting for a sprint race. So yeah, fair play. Got no complaints. Nothing really stand out. Again, no real big incidents, no collisions as such. I don't think anyway. I know Lando and Leclerc got a little bit close, but that's just there. Okay, we'll wear that one. Then qualifying, Lewis out. We had qualified Lewis. If he'd have said that at the start of the week, we'd be happy. Well, obviously not, because we still sort of kind of sucked. But it was still quite good to say we had qualified him. It's a strange one. Don't really understand what happened there. But for Valtteri, yeah, we had good performance. And we just missed out. It's just small gaps, frustrating the sport. Apart from that, I don't think there are any major shocks that we should be really worried about. It makes for a good race tomorrow, I guess. So tonight we had M&M at the track. We had a big college football game, so Austin's pretty lively. I'm going out for some chicken. Catch you later.
Have some chicken. There was actually a really good Texas-Georgia football game Saturday night there. Texas lost, which was the upset number 1 versus number 5. It was a big game.
Yeah, cool. I'm gonna
Move
try
on.
to pretend interested and move on. Okay, so we come to race day. Everyone lining up. Actually, before we get here, I noticed this year, and did you, that COTA dialed down a little bit the over-the-top Americanisms.
Yes.
Like, I didn't cringe this race at all. I thought the anthem sung by that choir was phenomenal.
And it had them on the grid and up on the lookout thing.
And I didn't think it was any of the over-the-top cheese that you've kind of watched in previous years and gone.
In a giant Cadillac with bull horns on it, the Texas Longhorns on the front. Yeah, and we had less unaware celebrities on the grid.
Yeah.
Everyone Martin grabbed knew about F1. So
I think America is kind of now felt its way into F1 enough where you can still be American, but without being stereotypical, like cringeworthy. I really enjoy
before Vegas. Can we?
Vegas is Vegas. Vegas is in its own little bubble, right? To me, you've got two little bubbles in the F1 universe that just don't get penetrated by any, Monaco and Vegas. They just live in their own universes. Vegas! Anyway, so we had a great grid walk. We had great anthem and introduction. Nothing cringy. They all line up. Everybody on mediums, apart from Stroll, Colapinto, Hamilton, Lawson, and George, who all decided to rock up on the hard tyres to get us going. And then we were ready for lights out. And the most bizarre thing in the world happened, really, where Lando got the best start ever, had like a 3 or 4 tenth, no,
great job,
100th, 3 or 400th better reaction time than Max, and absolutely cruised away. I was like, there you go, Lando, that's how you do starts.
And he closes the door by not fully closing it.
He closes the door and then says, oh, that's not actually closed. Let me just check. Oh, there's Max. Yeah, that's gone.
Totally.
He moved across to close the door and then just didn't close it.
But
it's like my kids claiming to close the fridge door, but leaving like that inch open where it's all the cold's going to come out. It's like, well, you still didn't close it.
Somebody late in the F1 post-race show commented that turn 1 at COTA is wider than most people give it credit for. They talk about the rise and then the fall, but it's a very wide corner. And in most corners, you can easily cut someone off by moving 2-3 car lengths left or right. Lando went like 3 car lengths left. Max still had a wide opening. And then as the two of them ran off, Charles was like, hey, look at this. I can pick this up for free. And it was wild. Like that.
Sorry, guys. Charles's eyes must have just opened like so wide. When Max went up the inside and maybe sent it a little bit too hard, and we'll debate this later because it's this whole special situation of turn 1, lap 1, where you're allowed to do whatever you like apparently and get away with it. But anyway, so Max probably goes in a little bit faster than he should. Him and Lando go off and kind of leave the track limits, and Charles's eyes must have just opened up and gone, seriously, this is mine?
Wide open track?
Okay. Yep, I'll have that. Just pop straight through. And just before we move on, I've got to give a shout out. I got a friend and colleague, Jose, was sitting right on corner 1, and he sent us a video of the start. What a view he had. It was his first time at COTA. Took his daughter, Olivia, niece, Gabrielle, and wife, Angela, and they've had a blast there today. He's been sending me texts all day going, this is amazing. I'm coming back next year. I mean, he's a complete convert. He's in. He's all in.
Love it. And Dirty Cider Coach Mike, Mr. H was there as well. We talked about this, and he sent some videos, but I have an audio of his we'll play in a minute because he actually has his own cell phone video of the Lando Max battle when they went off. And like you can see
awesome.
it. I mean,
I love it. I love getting the live stuff from the tracks. It's brilliant.
And Mike said the same thing. He goes, I want to go back ASAP. I want to be at another race. Oh, man. So anyway, in the midst of all this first turn chaos, Ocon got spun around, went to the back of the pack, which quite frankly didn't really matter because we didn't see him the rest of the race.
Unless you thought it was a McLaren because you saw an orange car spinning.
Unless you're a big fan of Esty Besties. Other than that, we can move on. Hamilton moved up to 12th. Everyone was very excited about Lewis's progress because they didn't know that 2 laps later he'd beach himself in the gravel and call it a day because he'd hit the spin button on that Mercedes.
It was the Wheel of Fortune in the garage. That's what it was.
It was. And I loved for the next couple laps, Carlos was right on Max's trumpet. And he was running those tires. He goes, I don't care what happens. I'm not here next year. This is the point where they've probably cut him out of like next year conversation. Same for Lewis at Mercedes. Like, you don't have to come to this one. And he goes, all right, you don't want me coming to the meeting? I'm going to do what I got to do for me. And he went out there in the sprint and was great. We didn't talk enough about Carlos in the sprint. He went up from 5th to 3rd. He did a great job in the race. And he was right on Max's trumpet. And I'm thinking, yeah, those tires ain't going to make it. You're going to be on like a 5-stopper here, Carlos. Take it easy, buddy. But he still did a great job. That Ferrari seems to be really good at this point. The flip of where it was a year and a half ago on Tire Dag.
And also the flip of where it was a few races ago. They started off the year looking like they were going to be feisty. Then they kind of went off and decided, you know what, we're going to keep Aston Martin company because they get lonely in the back there. And then they've kind of brought some upgrades that are actually upgrades. And and the Ferrari fan in me is just like, I can't be happier. So I was convinced Sainz was about to get Max any minute. Then we see Hamilton on the beach where George had beached it. It's like, well, if George could do it, I want to try that as well.
But I'm not going to hit the barrier. I'm just going to get part way in and then call it a day.
Part way in and just park it there and I'll be done for the weekend. But it seemed to take forever to turn it into a safety car. They kept racing, they kept going. It was just a yellow flag. Sainz was still all over the back of Max. Sainz was just about to put a move on him when they went, safety car.
Well, they waited a whole lap until they got back to the scene of the beaching.
Yep.
It was like a single yellow. And
then
like double waved yellows. And then for quite some time, like, full safety car. But it was until they were getting close again.
Yeah, and if you listened really, really closely, the reason why it took so long is they actually deployed it immediately. But if you listened to the onboard really, really closely, you could hear snoring. And do you know what that snoring was?
No.
It's Bert Mylander, because he's been asleep since Canada, because he hasn't been called into action. And they've been trying for ages to get through to him. Bert, you're up. Well, we call him Bert, because me and you call him Bert. But anyway.
Burned.
Burnt. Bert, you're up. You've got to go. And he's like... No, what time is it, Mommy? And it's like,
does he use Max's trick to Monaco? Basically, this is Max in Monaco.
This is Corey. Should have brought my pillow.
Should have brought my pillow. Burned Mylander. First time in 10 races that he was called out to be used.
So he finally has to remember how to start the safety car and pull it away and get out there. So we watch a couple of replays of the start while they're trundling around getting rid of Lewis's car. And then, as much as I love Charles...
I love him a lot, you know that.
Yeah, I know you do. As much as I'm the Ferrari fan, when they were getting ready for the restart, I was like, right, don't go now, Charles, because Max is right there. Just like, at least fake it. Oh, no, you've gone. And Max completely read it. And I was like, oh, Charles, what have you done? You've basically just sent a direct message to Max's inbox and gone, I'm going to pull away in like 2 seconds if you want to come with me.
Carlos got the message too. It was a 1, 2, 3. Like everyone was in lockstep. I'm like, Charles, come on, man. You got to like time it a little bit randomly or something.
So then Charles kind of realized the error of his ways. And this is where he gets his redemption, because he then goes, oh, crap. I was supposed to fake it and then pull away from Max. I suppose I better go and drop a fastest lap just to break the DRS. And that's exactly what he did. And then we got a really worrying message, which then seemed to go nowhere because I never heard any more of it.
This was so bizarre to me. We were trading. Not only were we trading notes, we were trading WhatsApps on this. Carlos says, I smell fuel in the car and I'm getting cutouts as I depart corners. And they're like, we see that. So it's real. Hang on a second. Like jump out a second.
Hang on, I can smell fuel.
I smell gas in an open air cockpit going 200 miles an hour. So you know how much gas has got to be leaking or whatever for me to smell it 200 miles as I'm going beyond where I'm going? Anyway, then they go, we need you to go to setting Delta 5, Ferrari 3, Plan 9, Zulu 4-3, Tango 9er. And he goes, oh, okay, all fixed. What?
I have no idea what happened there. It's like, part of me kind of thinks there's some big screen in the Ferrari garage and there was just this setting they should have pressed that seals off the fuel pipe into the cockpit or something. And Sainz comes on the radio and goes, I can smell fuel. And everyone's like, no, you can't possibly. And they turn around and they're like, Vincenzo, you did press the button to turn off that, didn't you? And he's like, oh, yeah, of course. Tell him to go to Delta 9. Just buy me 5 minutes.
Do you think there's any chance that they had the drink set up wrong and this was Kimmy's situation?
You will not have the drink.
Because the drink was fuel?
I don't know, but
We
how'd
put
you
the
go?
straw into the gas tank instead of your tea bag for you to drink out of.
How'd you go from smelling fuel and having no power out of corners to then being fine?
To dialing a knob on your dashboard, and you're like, oh, it's fine now. I'm just going to go ahead and just kick some butt.
That just hurts my head to think there's even a setting on the dashboard that, in the event that we've accidentally got fuel spilling into the cockpit, just go to this setting. Well, why wouldn't you have that setting to start with? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, but how rich is it running for you to smell gas at 200 miles an hour when the exhaust is, 40,000 feet behind you? Anyway, at this point, Joe went for a little spin at turn one because the Saubers hadn't had enough fun yet. Liam Lawson took Fernando Alonso around lap 10, the new BFFs.
Oh,
Liam
yeah,
was
we didn't cover that in the sprint, did we?
We did not. Liam was interviewed after the race, and they talked about it, and he said, I think Fernando is amazing. I'm always open to learning from him. He said all the right things, but boy, did Fernando get really pissed for no reason.
He did.
I didn't think there was a reason for it. Did you?
I mean, what did it even go back to? Did it even go back to quali or practice when Liam cut in front of?
It was
I don't know.
sprint quali, I think.
Was it sprint quali? I don't know. It was bizarre for Fernando, old father time, to get so rattled by that. But then we had, 12 laps in. Max is up at the front trying to kind of make a race of it. So, of course, somebody in exactly the same machinery that started not too far back will be slicing through the field unless they're Checo.
Nothing. Doing nothing. Making no impression on anyone around him. We'll talk more about Checo in a second. But at this point, Leclerc pulls out 6 seconds on Max in second place. And it's starting, the front of the race is starting to get set. This idea that Leclerc over Max has a car that's better on its tires and slightly faster with a driver who may not quite be as skilled as Max, but don't sleep on Charles Leclerc. He can drive away from people with he's done this before, and he did it today.
And then I think at this point, Horner came out to put the excuse out there so that they could cover for why Charles was going off into the distance. We hear this random message about, we found an issue with the car, and don't worry, we'll sort it out at the next pit stop.
And by sort it, I mean do nothing.
Do nothing. Because the commentators are like, oh, watch out when Max comes in, because if it's this or if it's that or if it's the other,
it was nothing.
it's at least going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to the pit stop. Nothing. They changed the wheels. Nothing.
Nothing.
Another random
they didn't
radio
even,
message.
Hand him a Gatorade. It was nothing.
It was just like the Carlos Sainz fuel thing. We had Max's mysterious car problem they would sort out and did nothing. Sainz and his fuel, press a button, it'll all be fine. It was just random radio messages. But and then George gets a penalty for forcing Valtteri off. Now
here we go. Because this is the beginning of the who ran someone off and who gets credit for the being run off or running someone off.
Yeah, and
Liam had done this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut. Liam did this in the sprint. I mean, not Liam. Oscar did this in the sprint and got a penalty, 5-second penalty in the sprint. So he ran someone off. So you're thinking the runner-offer is the penalized party.
Yeah,
but
and George then did the same thing as Piastri. George came in a little hot,
right?
Forced Valtteri off. He gets the penalty. Toto didn't like it, called it a joke. You can make the argument that I thought the George one did look a little harsh. I didn't think George came in that hot. He seemed to leave enough room for Valtteri, but because Valtteri's been on the show, I'm always going to back friend of the show Valtteri.
This is Valtteri Bottas, and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
So I thought it was a little harsh, and off the back of that, Bottas came in and pits for hards, and then George gets a penalty for it. And at this point, I can make a joke at my own expense, but when George came on the radio and they said, you got a penalty, sorry, George, for that. And he went, and his voice went up the same octave that mine did when I saw George in Canada. So that's kind of a nice little ironic kind of full circle moment that George went up the same level as I did. So
if you say so. So then we started seeing people pitting, and we realized immediately the undercut was powerful, not just because the track was hot and resurfaced and the length of the tire life, but the gas man pits, and K-Mag was ahead of the gas man after being behind him before his pit. So it
not
was
even by a small amount.
It's true, but it worked. And
no,
then,
what I mean is, like, when he came out a lot ahead. Like, the undercut was, like, powerful.
And Lando did the same thing to Max. I mean, like, we saw this. The undercut was powerful. And so it just became like a question of whose cars are going to do better on the current tires and next tires. And again, I will stand by my just a regular fan analysis that the McLaren gets better as it burns off fuel. It is a car that performs better regardless of compound of tire when they have less fuel. I know
it might be less fuel, but also it was interesting when they asked, I can't remember if it was Oscar Orlando. I think it was Oscar. Said, how are these tires doing? Because they were trying to extend the mediums. They could go for the one stopper. They said, how are they going? He said, finally we've driven through the graining. So, and then off they went, and both of their paces increased. So I don't know if it probably is fuel as well, like you say, but McLaren do seem to have a problem. They seem to grain the tyres up quite early in the stint, but they're able to drive through it. And once they've gone through the suffering of the graining and they come out the other end, they kind of turn into rocket ships.
They do. They really do.
It's
especially with
bizarre.
Clean air. So if you are behind somebody, they're not as good. If you have more fuel, they're not as good. If you give them open track and less fuel, I think they're pretty hard to catch on any track from Singapore to Monza. Anyway, we get to lap 24. Charles now has a 10-second lead on Max. It becomes fascinating to watch the Ferraris of Charles and Carlos continue to function well on their tires. They go long, they go short, they box early, they try an undercut. A year and a half ago, they ate their tires for lunch, and they could quali well, but they couldn't race pace. Now they're actually doing a bit of both, and they're dangerous in quali, but they're even better in race pace. And you gotta think, with no upgrades brought this weekend, they gotta be pretty happy with where they are for the rest of the year, right?
100%. Ferrari were absolutely killing it, and then at the same time, you'd got, like we just said, Lando's driven through the graining and is now reeling in Max, and we're all thinking, well, now he's getting, like, the little graphic came up at the bottom saying, now he's in undercut strike zone, like, just box him and he'll come out ahead of Max, just like K-Mag has seen. But he didn't. He didn't box. He got right within the window. It was Max that came in first. I was like, oh, is this another one of those McLaren drop the ball because they should have pitted but didn't? We've seen that a few times in recent races. So Max came in, like you say, nothing happened in the pit stop. They didn't give him nothing happened. There was no issue on his car.
Fix everything in the pit, and by fix everything, we mean do nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So Max comes out, and we're like, well, okay, does that mean Lando's going to come in next lap just to try to minimize the undercut? No, and it's like, this is 100% one-stop territory for McLaren now, isn't it? There's no way they are they're two-stopping. So yeah, that was fascinating just to see how long they could go. And they kept asking the drivers, "How long can you keep the pace going on this?" And they seemed, once they get through that grain in, they just seemed absolutely fine.
I loved this. Another thing about this race, a couple notes together. Rob's note: first time in a long time where no one's really in witness protection, because we've had action, stories, battles for so many cars at so many positions. And at this point, as he types this, Pierre, Lance, and Alex are going at it for like 15th, if I've got the position right. And it is I love this, ding-dong battle for like a lap and a half, or at least a solid lap, where they're all in each other's, it's like two abreast no matter what, sometimes three. And I loved this. The whole race, and I'm trying to figure out a good metaphor or analogy, and I haven't come up with it yet. The simile has escaped me. But there was always a battle happening this entire race. It wasn't always in the front. It wasn't always in the back. But it was pretty spread throughout. And through the whole race, we always had somebody in someone else's DRS. And it wasn't just like following. It was, I'm going to take you at this corner. And then they'd cut each other off. They'd do the switcheroo. And then you'd cut away from third place battle to 15th, to 18th, to 2nd, 12th. And I loved this. It actually worked really well. Had all of them happened at the same time, this race would have been super boring, because when it was done, it would have been a snooze fest. But there was always a battle happening, and COTA really, in my opinion, delivered. And yes, it was great that we were all horned up for a race after 3 weeks' time. But still, I thought it was great. So yes, we talk about this. There was always something happening, and it was always fascinating, with the exception of the lead. And I'm okay with that. I can live with that.
Yeah, I mean, in a bizarre way, not to be anti-Max, because like we've always bigged up Max when he's done well, but I was okay with it being boring at the front because it was a Ferrari and it was Charles, so I was pretty
Yeah.
happy. But so then we had 32. Lando came in, 2.2 second stop, nice. And off the back of that, just starts slowly but surely eating into Max's lead. He came out of the pits 6.5 seconds behind Max. And I think by 39, so 7 laps later, he's down to 2.5 seconds behind him. In the meantime, Checo had taken 3,000 years to get past Colapinto.
Well,
I mean,
when
that is
you're
a Williams.
It is a Williams. When you're behind a Williams,
Driven by a rookie.
a rookie in a Williams, it's a good thing it takes you 17,463 laps to pass him. In a Red Bull, which last year was the most dominant car in the history of F1, and your teammate is currently leading the Drivers' Championship. But if you're battling for ninth, and you can battle a Williams, don't sleep on it.
Just while we were kind of watching the Norris countdown clock going and the striking distance to Max, we got this really random radio message out of nowhere to K-Max. It's like, box now!
I gotta go get that sound. That was phenomenal. Box, please, box, fast as you can, boss. Don't pass. We got a box, box. We're gonna explode. Like, what was happening?
Well,
And
I
never
don't
actually
know.
heard. Tear off in the vents? Like, we don't know. Puncture?
They were speculating on what it might have been, but it was like, it was very clear that he must pit, and he must pit right now.
I
Do
actually
not drive
think-
past.
Can I tell
don't
you
know.
a hypothesis here of what really happened? Gene had signed a new sponsor, and he had their sticker in his hand. And he had to have him box that lap and get the sticker on the car. Now, I didn't see the pit stop, so you can't tell me that Gene Haas didn't actually slap a Chipotle. They already have that.
Rich energy.
Toyota Gazoo, Rich Energy, MoneyGram. If they were looking for something, I think he tossed it on there right there, personally. But that's just me.
Okay, and then so we get to lap 44-ish, heading towards the final 10 laps, and Lando finally arrives in Max's DRS. And if COTA hadn't served us up an absolute treat for the previous 46 laps, the last 10 laps were just next level. They were just
Can I just
phenomenal.
give the JV version before the varsity race? When Colapinto comes out of the pits, he's right in front of K-Mag on 40. So the prelude to Max and Lando on 44 getting going were 4 laps of Franco Colapinto and K-Mag. I would argue 2 of the more aggressive drivers in F1.
Yep.
Leaving nothing, giving nothing, and still not touching each other for 3 to 4 laps of close following, of just amazing battling. And I'm like, whoa, boy, that was crazy. And then all of a sudden we cut over to Max and Lando. I'm like, oh, I can't take this anymore. My heart,
Yeah, I don't think I breathed properly from lap 46 to the end of the race because it was just one of those where you just couldn't not watch what was going on track.
like an
because
old Southern woman. I do declare.
Lando was just, I'm going to use your phrase here, Lando was just up Max's trumpet
Totally.
for the entire 10 laps. Well, not quite because we'll get there, but it was insane. He would get down to 0.3 seconds. He would maybe get a lunge at turn 1, but couldn't quite do it. So he would then be super glued to the rear wing all the way through the S's and then try and do it down the back straight. The 2 of them, absolutely amazing racing. Hats off to Max for being in the right place to defend all the way around and probably use his battery in the right place as well at the right time. But those 2, just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant racing. But there always seems to have to be a but between these 2. 5 laps to go. And Lando finally gets traction out of the corner and gets within whatever it was, the 0.4 seconds. That he'd always been 0.6, so he was never quite close enough to put the move on him. This time he came out of the corner 0.4 behind him with the DRS involved, flies down. We see the move. He goes around the outside. Max, I've got to say, just does what George and everyone else who got penalised for later in the day on the inside, pushes the outside car off. So much so that they both leave the track. And this is where things get a little grey for me, because we've always seen that when a car leaves the track and makes an overtake and gets I think the regulation says an unfair advantage, you've either got to give that place back or get a penalty.
Right.
But when both cars are off the track,
Right.
so the one that is being overtaken isn't on the track to be unfairly overtaken because he went off the track as well, and he was the one that did the pushing to send them off. I don't know how the stewards untie that one. I mean, I'm not saying Max did it on purpose. I'm not saying that Max did anything necessarily wrong, but I'm not sure Lando did either. I'm firmly in the bracket of racing incident on this one.
So, like, I agree with you. There's so many parts of this. Who was ahead at the apex? How do you
Where's
define
the apex?
Exactly. See, how do you define the apex? I thought we had made a Max Verstappen rule on this after 2021, which said if you go off the track to cut somebody off to take their position, you lose. Like, you have to stay on the track. And he would actually do dive bombs, if you remember this, in late 21, early 22, where he would cut someone off, push them off the track, and he would lock up trying to stay on the track, even though his angles were all wrong. They weren't racing lines. But if you stayed on, you were okay. And so I'm still, like, part of that sticks with me. If you run someone off the track and you yourself go off the track, that's on you, brother. Like, you can't control your own car then. So, like, to me, this is a Max problem, not a Lando problem. That said, I would have preferred no one get a penalty because they'd been battling for 5 laps. They'd had time to go back and forth. It had been clean and was clean. And Max went off, pushing Lando off. If Max is off, that means Lando already has free reign to grab any unfair, I'm doing air quotes again, unfair advantage. And so if Lando can take Max when they're both off the track, well, that's Max's fault for going off. If Max had stayed on, I'd entertain the idea of a Lando penalty here. But he didn't stay on. So that's the way I look at it.
That's the thing that just stuck out for me is that if Lando goes around the outside and goes off the track and takes Max, and Max keeps all 4 wheels inside track limits, sorry, Lando, you got
or
2
feisty.
Wheels.
Give me 2 wheels, at least on the inside.
Well, but you're not allowed to do that, Lando. You're going to have to give the place back.
Right.
But the moment Max
puts all 4 off.
Dive bombs, but I'm just going to say, the moment Max takes that corner at an angle and speed that means he can't stay on the track and takes the 2 of them off the track.
Right.
Once you're both off the track, I'm almost thinking anything goes there because who's got the unfair advantage? Anyway,
before we realize that we're not smart enough to figure this out, but it's a combination of who's ahead at the apex, however you define apex, who's on and off the track. All that matters is Crofty knows where the racing really happens.
Dirty side of the track.
Sorry. That wasn't even this race, man. When you're talking about parts of the track, I had to throw it out there.
Yeah, so Lando gets past. Now, here's where people can say, in good old hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, McLaren should have told him to immediately give him the place back, and then he's got 5 laps to attack Max.
They need a penalty.
But they really did the same as us. We just thought that's probably going to get noted, but the stewards aren't going to intervene because it looked like a racing incident. So
Monday morning,
they tell him to just go for it and just basically try and pull the 5 seconds out anyway. So if you get the penalty, you're home and dry. But he pulls like 4.1 out. It's like tantalizing. He pulls 4.1. He gets the penalty. So it kind of put a little bit of a dampener on what was an absolutely epic battle between those two because I really didn't want it to end that way. But in the end, we get Ferrari 1-2, which was absolutely phenomenal. Sainz, we didn't mention this. Sainz for a while was starting to look a little bit feisty and looked like he might take the battle to Charles. And I think somebody must have told him to just just bring this home, guy.
I doubt he listened.
Bring it home.
He went for it. But they actually had very similar times. It's just the beginning of the race. Charles built that lead, and then Carlos couldn't cut into the average lap times, but they were running similar lap times most of the race. So that's my 4 seconds.
Yeah, probably right. So we had Charles from Carlo, Max on the podium after the 5 second gets applied to Lando. So not a disaster for Lando in the World Championship because he only lost a point in the sprint and he lost 3 in the race. I think so. He's lost 4 overall. But
you need to be making up each race as opposed to losing, but he didn't lose enough. I mean, it just didn't. I think the bigger problem is 1 of 6 is gone and he didn't make up ground.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's made it harder for him, but it wasn't disastrous. Disastrous would have been swap Lewis for Lando each on the gravel. That would have been disaster. So is it, does it terminate Lando's charge at the title? No. Does it now make Ferrari believe that Charles is in the hunt and that they're also in the hunt for the constructors title?
Yes, on constructor, no on driver is my opinion.
I think they're going to believe on both. I think they're probably only going to stand a chance for constructors. But all of a sudden, if Ferrari can carry that on, I mean, boy, we could.
I'd be willing to put money on them taking second in the constructor at this point. Not just first per se, but definitely second ahead of Red Bull. I think it's a McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull constructor at this point.
I'm not even sure Red Bull are in the conversation because our boy Checo can't. Max
Right.
can't win Red Bull have now fallen behind. I did have the page up 2 seconds ago and should have left it up so that I could have read it out. So here we go. I got it now. So after today's race, we have McLaren in the number 1 spot with 544 points, ahead of Red Bull at 504, ahead of Ferrari at 496, 8 points back.
Wow.
Now,
I'm telling you, Ferrari's got second locked up.
So
They don't yet, but
you
they
say it's a
will.
McLaren Red Bull Ferrari battle. I don't think Red Bull are in a battle.
I
I
agree.
think Red Bull are a sinking stone because even if Max wins every race,
Checo won't.
Checo.
I mean, I hate to say this. Can we look at the bottom of the points scores? And again, for those that may be new, I'm a big Checo fan. I've said this for 2.5 years.
I know this hurts you to your core. What he's
It
doing
does.
right now.
I'm done. I've finished. I was close to the end before the fall break. I can't defend him anymore. He was 7th. He finished behind George, who started from the effing pit lane. George Russell in a Mercedes, which spun around uncontrollably, started in the pit lane. And so we end up with Checo finishing behind him in 7th.
So
and wait, hold
40 seconds behind Max.
Yes, and here's the best part. Who is right behind Checo? Nico Hulkenberg in a Haas.
3 seconds behind him.
Liam Lawson in the Visa Cash App RB Minardi AlphaTauri. And then Franco, this is my 4th race. I have a driver sticker on the back that says rookie driver Colapinto in a Williams, which was nowhere for the first half of the year. Williams, RB, Haas, Checo. Bro.
I know. The most disappointing thing for me where you read at Colapinto there is that, and hence going all the way back to the beginning when we were talking about the news and the fastest lap change, is that Colapinto had the fastest lap for the last 10 laps. It was his, I think. And so he was going to get his 10th spot and a fastest lap point. And then Esteban Ocon at the back, pootling around doing nothing, decides he's going to go and drop a fastest lap and just he got it. He got the fastest lap, so of course no point because he finished 18th.
Can I play my only Esteban radio? It's my favorite. Here it is.
Go for it.
Say to Haas that I'm going to go for it, so better be ready.
I hope they told Haas he was going to go for it, so better be ready. That was Mexico last year. I love this race. Again, it felt like there was enough action. Like if you had taken the field and said, all right, we're going to need someone battling every 3 to 4 laps at different points throughout the grid. And everyone goes, okay. And they did. There was never like multiple battles at the same time, or very rarely. And at the end, I looked, and there was only one car in DRS at that point, and it was Lando on Max. I'm like, well, this is juicy. And, you couldn't have scripted it any better. I thought that was a great COTA.
Yeah, I think if the producer had got together all the drivers before the drivers' parade and said, right, if you guys could take laps 1 to 5, and you guys could, it was just, like you say, it was just perfectly laid out. The only little blip that they would have on their entire organization this time is on the podium. If you noticed, and if you'd been reading the news this week at all, the trophies that they were given this week were Pirelli tyres. And they were not supposed to be Pirelli tyres. They were supposed to be these lovingly crafted artistic trophies that have been put together by some artist that obviously hadn't run his idea by anybody that knows anything about copyright infringement. We've put I've seen if you haven't seen the images, go and Google the COTA trophies and then just put the word Mickey Mouse or Dead Mouse, whichever one you want to put in. And these 3 trophies, I'm going to go with the Mickey Mouse view. There is no way that anybody in any meeting looked at those designs and went, you've squared this off with Disney, right? They're not going to sue us for these, are they? Oh, yeah, it's fine. I've spoken to them. It's all good. Like, that conversation never happened because these are Mickey Mouse with his hands in the air trophies.
Can I be honest? So, I love cars, and Dead Mouse is a big car person, and they paint their cars interesting colors, different liveries, wraps, and so forth. And for the last, 15 years, me being an old man, and very old man, I thought it was Dead Mouse 5 until like a week ago when I saw a video. They go, it's Dead Mouse. And I'm like, what?
Oh, the 5 is an S.
So I had to, I'm being totally vulnerable, totally honest. I thought it was Deadmau 5. And I'm proud to say for the last at least week or two, I've known it's Deadmau. But moving on. Rob, are you ready to go with King of the Pits first this week?
Yeah. When are we doing Paul's final
come after
wrap
Sap
up?
Stats and
Okay, after Sap Stats.
Let him
Okay,
close the
so
week.
go on then, fire up the music. I'm ready for King of the Pits.
You're the king of the pit.
Yeah. Mr. Vale, who you got? King.
On your soundboard,
Yes.
can you press the one that goes Charles, Chuck, Leclerc? I'm just giving it away, but play it.
Charles Chuck Leclerc.
There you go.
That's it. King of the Pits. Saw his moment at the beginning, eyes wide open when Max and Lando were taking each other out, snuck through and never looked back. Absolutely perfect drive from the boy Leclerc, and he's my King of the Pits. That's it.
So I agree. I would give it to Charles Chuck Leclerc. However, I would say there's a close second because I look at the weekend as opposed to just the race. And this...
Stop inventing.
He's leaving Ferrari. He won't get the credit he deserves. He is obviously a very...
Smooth operator.
But he was aggressive, maybe too much so, in the sprint race. He was opportunistic and was running hard throughout the whole race. He finished third and second in those races, respectively. Yes, Charles Chuck Leclerc, who, as you know very much, I have a soft spot in my heart and a hard spot in my pants for him. He was amazing. But Carlos has to be given some thought. Both Ferrari boys took a great car and performed well.
Yeah, and if you give her an honourable shout outs, while it obviously is Charles, you look at the Hulk, Lawson, and Colapinto sitting in the points.
K-Mag,
on three
even.
cars.
Yeah, no, he didn't finish in the points. But
He didn't finish,
race.
but Haas had a great weekend. Liam Lawson has done himself no harm whatsoever in his reputation of starting back in Dallas and then driving his way up to ninth.
Agreed. All right, so the pits.
And Colapinto again. Again. Just
Agreed.
The boy's not doing himself any problems at all. So, go on, the pits. Here we go.
You're the pits.
All right, Rob, instead of us going first or second, I'm going to count down with fingers, and we're going to yell our driver name. 3, 2, 1, Checo.
Checo Perez.
Yeah. Checo.
Darn
it. I love this guy. I've loved Sergio for so long. He was one of the original, last 20-year tire whisperers. He did the most with the least. He turned that team of 7 people and a guy with an abacus into a real team. And now I'm willing to bet $5 American he will not be in that race car come first race 25. It'll be Liam Lawson or Yuki, but I'm betting Liam.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Checo bashing because I like him as well, but I'm just looking at this and thinking Red Bull seem over the last 2 races to have got the car back into a competitive position. They did well in Singapore.
Right.
But no, now I have to correct myself. They didn't do well. Max did well in Singapore. Max has done well in COTA here. And Sergio has just under-delivered again. And it's you've got 2 guys running around at the moment in Lawson and Tsunoda who are putting you under pressure. You didn't get past Yuki forever. Lawson was only 10 seconds back from you in the sister car that probably has all the plastic bits rather than carbon fiber. And you've got your teammate 40 seconds up the road and you're just not helping, and just to keep it on there, your underperforming is probably opening the door to allow Ferrari to come in and take second and have a chase with McLaren to see who can win the constructors. So you're not even going to cling on to second. You're probably going to be third because you're just not bringing it, Checo. And it hurts because I do like him. It hurts me
even more because I love him. But we're moving on. Sorry, Checo, brother. We support you as long as you're in that car. We'll always cheer for you, me especially. But let's talk about some SAP stats. And since we haven't had a race in 3 weeks, SAP Stats, USGP edition, 3-week hiatus. It was Ferrari's first 1-2 finish in the United States since Indy 2006, Indy 2006, with Schumi and Massa. That was not, as they said on the telecast, the 6 racers. That was 2005. So 2006 was a full race at the Indy Motor Speedway. It was only Ferrari's, this was wild to me, this was Sean Kelly one. It was only Ferrari's third 1-2 finish of the decade and sixth 1-2 finish in the last 14 years. OMG Ferrari. So I loved to see this. If you'd said to me in the last 14 years how many times they finished 1-2, I'd be like, I don't know, 30, 40, 5 before this. Insane. Leclerc started P4 today. He also started P4 for his last race win at Monza. So for all you gamblers, watch out for Charles starting P4 because that's going to be a victory. He's probably converted, and I hate to do this, probably converted more P4s to wins than poles. Sorry.
Yeah,
too soon?
Probably has.
Too soon.
No.
He'd only led 4 laps in Austin before today, Charles had, and it was the second year in a row where the winner came from outside the top 3 on the grid because Verstappen won from P6 in 23. And we often talk about that as we preview races where people have won from. So interestingly, COTA is kind of opening up that aspect. Similarly, he was the first driver to ever lead lap 1 from below the first row of the grid because he started 4th, and as Rob and I already talked about, took that first lane, first turn opportunity. It was the first time Verstappen failed to win in Austin since 2019. He'd taken consecutive Grand Prix and sprint races. And this one, they said this on the telecast. Verstappen finished 19 seconds behind the winner. And I'm like, that's not good. And then they go, the closest he has come to victory since the summer break. Like, what? What are we talking about here? Did that surprise you too?
It really did.
Verstappen's winless in his last 9 Grand Prix. Lando took P4 from McLaren after the 5-second penalty, cost him the podium, which we talked about ad nauseum. And Rob already said he's 57 points behind Max in the Drivers' Championship. However, his teammate Oscar Piastri finished P5. Oscar is still the top scorer in the last 9 Grand Prix collectively.
Yeah.
I love that stat. I love the fact that while Oscar didn't, if I'm being totally honest, make a huge impression this weekend, he shows that he's been consistent. And
he is doing what a number. Let's just right now they're back in Lando for the titles. So
as of now,
if you're doing a 1-2, Oscar is the number 2. And what should the number 2 do? Is bring home points for the team to carry on securing the constructors. Checo, take notes. That's what you're supposed to do when your teammate is up near the front.
Oh crap! Let me say this. I had a problem with my sounds for a long time, so I couldn't get this sound.
Papaya rules.
So papaya rules is an important thing. I finally got Oscar's win in Baku, which, again, we're talking about Oscar's consistency. This might be my favorite audio of all time. Here's Oscar after he won in Baku. Yes. Yes. That was it. That was the entire emotion. Okay, so we talked about Oscar. We already talked about the fact that George Russell started from the pit lane and finished 6th, while Sergio Perez started 9th and finished 7th. OMG. I love you, Checo. I think this is the end of your run. You don't have to retire in Mexico like everyone said you're going to do, but you'll be retiring pretty soon anyway. P8 for Nico, their best ever finish for Haas in a home Grand Prix. And 1 or 2 last ones. Liam Lawson, P9 on his RB return, tied his career best from last year's Singapore Grand Prix. Franco Colapinto, P10 for his second points finish in 4 Grand Prix starts. And Lewis went off in lap 3. And we already said this, but this is important. His going off triggered the first safety car deployment since Canada 10 races ago. Bernd Mylander's been getting paid for nothing. He even crashed in Monza. He crashed the car, still gets paid, did nothing for 10 races. I need that job. But that's the end of the stats. Rob, anything you want to highlight or add to?
No, let's go for it.
All right, so Dirty Cider, who's been on the 100 Seconds of DRS, Coach Mike, Mr. H, was at COTA, and he was sending us a bunch of pictures and videos. His video, Rob, if you haven't gone on our Twitter, go into our messages. He has a video of Max and Lando when Lando passes them on the outside, and then follows it through the next couple laps, and you can hear the crowd just absolutely losing their beep. It was great, Mike, you are the man, but here's his take, as we are all fans. Mike's first ever F1 event. I loved this because Rob, it reminded of me and you last summer.
Hey guys, I'm leaving the circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, and reporting on my first Formula One race. I will try to do a good job like Pitlane Paul, but those are some big shoes to fill. What a weekend. we arrived Friday morning from Chicago, and we're able to see P1, sprint qualifying, and walk the entire track and saw the cars at a lot of different places around the track. I never realized how hilly it was, but what a great venue. Leading up to yesterday with the sprint race and qualifying, another great day here. The people here are fantastic. The circuit is amazing. Today's race, the Ferraris just took off, as you guys saw, and everybody from the last 15 laps or so were focused on Lando and Max. I was sitting in turn 15, and I got to see the pass. As I said, I'm leaving the track, so they only showed one replay, so it's hard to tell if the stewards got it right. Leaving now, it's a madhouse, as you can imagine, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was a great time, my first Grand Prix, and hopefully my last. So I'm going to sign off, get it back to the guys, and Pitlane Paul, I'm sure you still have your job here at the Dirty Side. Take care, guys.
Mike, that was awesome. Then we send a lot of texts after that, and he talks about how badly he wants to go to another race again soon. The bug has bit him, just the way it bit us last year in Canada.
Oh, I know.
Can't get enough. It's phenomenal being in person. If you're a fan and have never been and have the opportunity, because financially it's a big draw, if you have the opportunity to go, and even if it's just a practice, take it. It's so cool. Like, it was amazing. But we're going to wrap up the weekend with Pitlane Paul, as we should. Paul's third report, I have not heard this one. It just came in from Sunday.
The end of the triple donger.
Just for the record, the double donger was what the Vikings did on a boat in Minnesota, but that's a different story. Paul.
Hey now, so I'm going to do my review from a very noisy circuit. Everyone's packing up. You might hear a few helicopters. It might just be genuinely noisy. It might be absolutely fine. Who knows? That was the Austin Grand Prix. What did we think? I thought it was okay. Like, it seemed to take a while to get going, like a few races, and then the Max and Lando thing at the end. We can all have our views on that. I mean, look, I don't like the penalties being given for what they were. I just thought they were a bit nitty and annoying, those penalties. There was no real logic behind a lot of them. It was sort of like one of the main overtaking parts. I think I said yesterday, but it's one of the main overtaking parts, and you're almost making drivers potentially scared to have a go to overtake there. So I wasn't a massive fan of those penalties. And then, like, I think that the FA made a rod for their own back slightly with giving them, which also then caused the issue with Max and Lando. I thought it was harsh on Lando, if I'm being completely honest. I understand why, he has gained an advantage. But, I don't know, there's fine margins there, and it's something I don't know, I'd like to see, I'd almost like to see that change a little bit. I mean, Max is good at running people wide and running them out of track. We've seen it before. Is it fair? Well, I mean, it's got to be if you consider that he didn't get a penalty. So, but it's a strange one for me. Apart from that, Lewis Hamilton, my God, what a weekend for him. Absolute nightmare. I don't think anyone really probably saw a Ferrari 1-2 coming, so that was pretty epic. I bet Rob's really happy. But let's say a good Austin Grand Prix. I think it was good just based on the fact that it wasn't you start pole, you win the race, you start second, you win the race. Tomorrow, head to Mexico City. Mexico. I mean, are they going to come thick and fast now? I hope you enjoyed that anyway. Keep up the good work, guys, and we'll speak next week. My God, next week.
Paul, that was epic. So, Paul, thank you for those reviews. Yeah, go ahead.
I do appreciate Paul for doing these, because I always think, it's like, sometimes he goes, oh, it was okay. And I think, okay, well, you weren't watching the same thing as we were watching. And then I think, well, you're probably not, because he's also looking through the lens of watching what Valtteri and the team are doing.
He's
and
working. He's doing a job.
And they suck at the moment. So it's got to be so hard to get, like, that up for watching everyone else in the paddock be having a good time, while you're just going, oh, yeah, we're last again. So I
appreciate the reviews, Paul. And yes, if you listen this far in, let us know if that was you on that Instagram reel. And then, secondly, Mike, thank you for your reviews. It's time to wrap up fantasy and close the weekend proper before we look forward to the Mexican Grand Prix. Oh, I'm sorry, am I snoring? Here we go. So, Crash Team Racing won Yasin 406 points. Now, I did not look. I'm sure there was a triple in there, or at least an unlimited, or some crazy mess. That's crazy, Yasin. Great job. Foot of Lead by Chuck, 383. Really good job. Waystar Royko, Busan, 373. At Yank to Mike. Mike nailed it, 357. He's a Yankees fan, and he's probably riding high. Professor's B Team, Rakesh, 353. F1 Fantasy HQ, Adam. He's an expert, 348. Max Verstappen Shafts, 24. Matthew. We've changed the name a couple times. It still works, 341. Stop Inventing Racing, our original OG Dirty Sider friend, Renato, 339. Team Melly from Muhammad. I'm sorry, the L's and I's are blending, Muhammad. I apologize for effing that up. And then 10th was Shui Transmitted Disease, Matt, 332. I had a weekend to forget with 238 points, 35th place. I was behind Rob. He was in 22nd with 273. Let's pretend I didn't have that weekend, and we can move on. And
I'm less than 200 points behind you now. I've just got to get my triple. I've got to play my triple on a week when you don't, and it's got to come good for me. And
I have my limitless and triple still at my disposal, and there's 2 more sprints. Paul was wrong in the beginning. There's Interlagos,
Brazil and Qatar.
Yeah. That's right, baby. Yeah. So just the top 3, Waystar Royko, Busan, 4,368 points. Verstappen, Fakri, 4,286 points. And Yank the Mike. Look at you, Mike. That's awesome, brother. 4233. We trade a lot of notes on Twitter, so that's awesome. Those are the only people above 4,200 points, although Andy is right behind. So nobody sleep, because Andy Tails, he don't mess around. Rob, we're in Mexico next week.
Yeah, come on. This has been a long one because
let's do it. Make it fast.
Sprint week and a race preview. So we're over an hour and a half already, I think. So let's wrap this up. So Mexico next week. It doesn't always give the best racing. I look back at our notes from previous years, and it's been a bit of a, what do we call it? It was a siesta fiesta, I think. Was
we
the
did,
episode
and I
title
love
last year.
Will's message to Lando's perfect.
It's gonna get boring.
But Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City, 71 laps of a 2.674 circuit that goes through the baseball stadium, which is cool but doesn't add to the racing.
Nope.
It's been 86 to 92 and had a bit of a hiatus, and then came back 2015 until COVID blitzed it for a year, and then it came back. Last year we had Charles on pole, but as was the script for last year, Max quite easily won it. Lewis went second, Charles went third. This was the one where Checo was under pressure, surprise, surprise, just like he is this year. So really, 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 really wanted to make a good impression and completely binned it. Lap 1, turn 1, said, I'm out of here, and retired from his home GP after about 12 seconds. No, probably 6 seconds, if that.
Maybe.
We had a couple of other big things. K-Mag had that big, do you remember his rear suspension broke, and he did that big left-right shimmy and then just went face first into the wall. We had a big safety car for that one. You were probably asleep at that point.
Probably.
Max won, and it was his 16th win of the season. And Lando, because this is when McLaren, if you are looking for signals about whether the McLaren goes well round here, they'd had their upgrades at this point, and Lando went from 17th to 5th. So who knows? We could be up for a bit of a ding-dong. Hopefully. Come on, Mexico. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Give us a race. Repeat winners. Max has got 5. Jim Clark, Prost, Mansell, and Hamilton have got 2. Red Bull have got 5. Surprise, surprise, those are all Max's, none are Checo's. And Lotus, McLaren, and Williams have got 3. Oh, and Mercedes have got 3, and Ferrari have got 2. So, please, Mexico, it's all we're asking. Come on. You've got the baseball stadium. It's cool. Maybe all these cars getting closer together this year. From last couple of years, it's been a bit of a Red Bull show, a Max show. So maybe if we've got both Ferraris, both McLarens, and a Max in there, 5 cars, surely you can give us a race. That's all we ask.
And
we're not asking for.
Checo's wondering if.
Are you still awake?
Are you still awake? Usually not at this race, Checo.
We're not asking for COTA. We don't need you to match COTA. COTA was amazing. It was a brilliant way to come out of the full break and shock to the system after 3 weeks of no cars. You don't need to do that. Just Give us a race.
So you're saying this is a drowsy sandwich because we have COTA, Mexico, Interlagos. And so the bread are excellent courses.
The
with
bread is
excellent
spicy.
Weekends. Exactly.
Oh, beautiful bread. Beautiful
But in
bread.
between is the blandest...
A turd.
I was going to say the blandest meat protein type item that you... Apparently Rob's eating turd sandwiches over there. Rob, anything else before we close out this epically long episode?
No, we've got on way too long as it is. So
let's let Rob have his
take
turd
a breath.
Sandwiches.
Get ready for preview posters tomorrow, midweek predictions, and then hopefully a race that we don't fall asleep in next week.
Right. Everybody, it's been epic chatting about this. Thank you for all your notes. Thank you for all of you who reach out and talk about your passion for F1. We have it too. We're all fans. We can't wait to talk to you in 1 week's time. Hopefully we'll be awake post the Mexico Grand Prix. Be well, be safe, everybody.